Welcome back to Aliya Yomi. Today we're going to be learning Chukas Sheni, the second Aliya in Parsha Chukas. Our Aliya is only 11 psukim long, from Perek Yud Tes Pasuk Yud Ches to Perek Chav Pasuk Vov. The topic of our Aliya is the end of the halachas of Parah Adumah, Miriam's death, and the complaint about water. We hear the last few psukim of the paragraph talking about the halachas of purity and impurity. So we hear that in the process of purification, that the hyssop is taken as a type of branch of a bush, and pure man takes and dips it into the pure water with the ashes of the red heifer and sprinkles it upon the chamber, the vessels, the human being which are impure. And this is done on day 3 and day 7 to the impurity. And at which point the person doing the purification process has to wash their clothes and is impure until evening. But this helps the process of purification of the vessels of the human being who came into contact with the dead. So that really belongs to the previous idea in Parsha, and that's why when Parsha's Para is laid as its own independent maftir, it goes until the end of this entire paragraph, not the Aliyah, which separates the middle of this concept. We now hear about a story which goes on, so we're moving out of mitzvah into narrative, where we hear about that Israel comes to the desert of Tzin, and which is in the Chodesh Harishon, in the first month, which what we call Nisan now, and in that desert Miriam dies and is buried there in the area of Kadesh. However, there's not enough water, and the community now gathers against Moshe and Aaron and complain. And they say, we wish we had died like our brothers before now. They ask, why did Moshe Rabbeinu bring them to this desert in the first place, a place which has no water? Moshe and Aaron run to the entrance to the Oil Moed, the Kliyakos says, because they were scared for their lives, and they prostrate themselves in front of Hashem, and Hashem appears on the Mishkan. So that's sort of, we end on a cliffhanger here. A few basic points to ponder when thinking about this Aliyah is, number one is, why is this Parsha right here after Parah Adumah? Why is this section, the immediately following section, the way the Torah is set up? So Rashi explains, to show that the Parah Adumah atones for, we'll call it infractions which relate to purity and impurity. And this to show us, quoting Chazal, that the death of great tzaddikim also atone. When a great and righteous person passes away, that imparts a great amount of spiritual power to the world as well, and atonement for those around them. The Baal HaTurim, in fact, points out a fascinating gematria and numerical value. The gematria of Parah Adumah is the same gematria, is the same numerical value as the word mechaper, to atone, which is also the same gematria of the word sham, there. Vatikover sham Miriam. Miriam was buried there. To link all the three concepts, the concept of the red heifer, the concept of Miriam's death and burial, and the concept of of mechaper, of being atoned. Why are they complaining about water now? So Rashi explains, because when Miriam died, Miriam was the merit for which there was a be'er, a well in the desert, and now that she is done, the well dries up and people now start complaining, which means that all the time that she was there, people took it for granted to a certain degree that there was always sustenance, and therefore this is sometimes we appreciate things only through lack. And finally, the most critical question on our Aliyah is, when did this actually happen? When did she die? Rashi makes a comment based on a clue. The pasuk says, Bnei Yisrael kol ha'eda, the entire nation. Why they call the entire nation? Rashi comments that this is the end of the 40-year circuit. That means to say that now we've reached the end of those 40 years, which is a remarkable thing, because in one pasuk we've essentially now skipped 38 plus years of the desert in absolute silence. This should be an important lesson for us, because if you read the Torah on a face value, you sometimes think that the nation of Israel are always complaining. That is incorrect. In fact, they complained a little bit in the first year and a half, and they complained in the last few months of the 40-year period. But for the 38 and a half interceding years, there was absolute silence, which meant to say everything was harmonious, everything was working just fine. So it's important to put that into context. The reason why we have what we have in the Torah is because that's the part that's relevant to us today. But there was certainly many, many harmonious years and successful years, spiritually and materially. And finally, Rav Hirsch makes a very beautiful point over here, is that why is that Miriam is dying now? Because her mission has come to a completion. What is her mission? We will remember that the nation of Israel was slated to die in the desert. Well, not exactly the nation of Israel, the men of the nation of Israel. In most of the cases of complaints, it was the men, not the women, which is why it was only the men over 20 years old who were slated for destruction during the course of the 40 years in the desert. The women were not subject to that decree, and they in fact outlived their colleagues, the men, which meant that the women were a critical link between the Exodus generation and the entering the land of Israel generation. And that it was necessary for them to tell the stories to remind them of the experiences they themselves had personally witnessed in order to maintain that link, that critical link, the glue between one generation and the next. When Miriam has successfully escorted the nation of Israel to the outskirts of Israel, which is now at the end of the 40th year, at which point she has now successfully achieved what it was that she needed. And at this point in time, she departs with mission accomplished. What a very beautiful and enlightening perspective. With this, we close the second Aliyah. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.